Can the United States stop Hamas's jihad in Gaza? It's a real question now that the international security forces are applying to be sanctioned by the world's leading international institution. But is it just a trap for Israel? And is it, in effect, a prevention of destroying Hamas? This is Dan Diker, and it's another episode of Al Shakal Ausat Lana, Our Middle East. Please join me and my co-host, Khaled Toameh, my dear friend and colleague of several decades. Here we are again. The situation in Gaza deepens, becomes more complex, and is now has an international wrapper called the United Nations. I can't think of something more troubling that ties Israel's hands as opposed to offering it unbridled flexibility to defeat a jihadist enemy that is really, Khaled, not only an enemy of Israel, but it is an enemy of the West. It is triggering confidence of jihadi movements all over the Middle East and in the West. And it is my sense, Khaled, that the more that the Trump 20-point plan and the well-intentioned military civilian task force in southern Israel, what they call the Center for Military Civilian Cooperation, becomes a real complicating factor, because at the end of the day, the only restraint is being placed on Israel in the interest of maintaining the framework of a regional Gaza and a regional ceasefire. Khaled, where are we in your view right now, a month after the Trump 20-point plan signed, implemented, and now we see Israel's hands tied far tighter than they were even a month ago?
Well, Dan, nearly 30 days after the Trump plan was announced, what we are seeing, or what we have been seeing over the past few weeks, is an attempt by Hamas to exploit this plan to entrench itself in Gaza by rearming, regrouping, deploying more forces on the ground, and preparing for a new era, an era where Hamas continues to control the Gaza Strip. This is very important because according to all the reports we see from Gaza and talking to people, Hamas is still there. They are in full control of the areas from where the IDF withdrew. So this is number one. Hamas is still there. Number two, we are, as I said, as you mentioned, we are nearly a month after the Trump plan was announced, and we haven't even finished phase one. We are today on Tuesday, we are November 4 or 5, and here we are. Hamas has still not released all the bodies. There are still 8 hostages, or the bodies of hostages in Gaza, held by Hamas, and this is very serious because it's in total defiance and non-compliance with not only with the agreement, but it's a total disregard for all the ultimatums that President Trump issued. Remember, 48 hours, Hamas has 72 hours, Hamas has a few more days, we'll give them 3 more days. And from what the sense is that Hamas is trying to drag this for as long as possible for a number of reasons. Number one, because they are not in a rush to arrive at phase 2, which requires the demilitarization of Gaza and the creation of a new government over there.
And the disarming of Hamas itself.
Well, according to Hamas, by the way, the word disarming does not appear in the Trump plan.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be very careful because the Trump plan talks about demilitarization and decommissioning of weapons. But I didn't see any reference to the need to disarm Hamas, which leaves the door open for many interpretations, by the way. Hamas is saying, it could mean that, we could hand over some of the weapons, but keep defensive weapons.
Or empty out the weapons from their bullets, from their weapon. That's
Or-
what decommissioning weaponry means.
Temporarily freeze the use of the weapons, which is a joke. At the end of the day, when you look at all of Hamas's actions, Hamas is clearly exploiting the Trump plan to buy time in order to consolidate its control over the Gaza, to tighten its control over the Palestinian population. And I'm sorry to tell you, they're being very successful. Now, in the meantime, what we are seeing, these attempts to internationalize the conflict in Gaza or the Gaza situation is very bad news, by the way. The more actors you have involved in Gaza, the more that ties Israel's hands in the future. Turkey just held a summit of Arab nations, Islamic nations, to discuss the future of Gaza. And they are very eager to send some kind of a force to Gaza. They already have some civilian presence, by the way, in Gaza, and that worries many people. Qatar. Now we're hearing that there's talk about bringing a UN force. It's at the end of the day, it's going to be a mess over there. Going back to the issue of demilitarization, we should learn the lesson from what is happening right now in Lebanon. We are several months after the ceasefire with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has not disarmed, despite a decision by the Lebanese government. And we were told that Hezbollah would not be allowed to rebuild its military infrastructure and, grow and have a presence in South Lebanon. And we see, according to the IDF itself and according to people in Lebanon, that Hezbollah is rebuilding its military capabilities. Hezbollah is rearming, regrouping. And this should give us, a sense of what is going to happen with Hamas in the future. These negotiations over the demilitarization of Gaza will continue forever. There will be endless, there will be with no limits, and they will give Hamas time to breathe. When we talk about jihadist groups, people need to understand these groups are very stubborn. They do not give up very easily. They are ideologically driven. In their activities, in their thinking, they do not have a wide perspective. They are focused on achieving their goal. And we all know what Hamas's goal is. We know what Hezbollah's goal is. So that's why I have been warning recently against attempts to rebrand Hamas and reproduce it. This talk about bringing a Palestinian or creating a new Palestinian force in Gaza is very dangerous because we've been to these movies before. Hamas will hand over the AK-47 and change its uniform and receive an M16 and operate under a different name.
By the way, very similar to what PLO terror groups did before Oslo, and then converting to Oslo, in which what ended up happening that is misunderstood in the West is that the Palestinian Authority hired their gendarmerie, soldiers by day, this paramilitary force by day, officially sanctioned, and by night they rejoined the terror militias in the PLO.
One of the reasons, Dan, why the Palestinian Authority security forces collapsed in Gaza in 2007, because they were not trained. These were people released from Israeli prison. These were Fatah activists. These were people who were not trained to fight, against crime and against external threats or internal threats even. And we saw Hamas easily taking over the Gaza Strip. There have been attempts by Europeans and other countries to train the Palestinian police force to make it more professional. And I would say that, they have been partially successful, but there is still a problem. So we might see the same thing happening with Hamas right now. This new security force that the Egyptians are trying to promote, or that they are currently training in Gaza or in Egypt, it will end up being a Hamas-dominated force. Because in Gaza, these are the people you have. No one is going, the only people who are security officers in Gaza are Hamas people. And Hamas is not going to allow the PLO or Fatah people to join this new force. So that's what I mean when I say we are talking about rebranding and reproducing Hamas under a different name.
This is a big problem, Khaled, because the rebranding, which is a Western idea, rebranding, it comes right out of Harvard Business School case study. And I remember being at Harvard Business School in the 1980s, what that rebranding looks like. Hamas is very sophisticated organization, and they understand, as good jihadists do, that the more that your adversaries, and for them the United States is an adversary, expresses excitement, intention, urgency, as President Trump has in his regional view, which is a very compelling view, I will say. But Hamas pays very close attention to President Trump's urgent statements and the statements of his Vice President J.D. Vance and others in the cabinet about the importance of keeping the ceasefire, what they call the ceasefire, which we understood as a hudna, intact. And the more the Americans led effort to internationalize this conflict, internationalize the solution, creates an understanding in Hamas that they can take much greater risks in terms of violence, in terms of subversion, in terms of threats, and that it will go unpunished because of the fact that it plays into this American urgency not to break apart the deal. This is a very important psychological aspect of everything that we're witnessing. And again, the West has made this misjudgment for decades regarding the Middle East. They don't understand that if you're ultimately a jihadist driven by the sword, living and dying by the sword or the rifle, if you want to use a modern day analogy, you are going to do anything to stay in power. That's what the Iranian regime has done, Hamas has done, Hezbollah has done. How can we help the West to understand that the Middle East works differently?
Well, the West needs to start, first of all, talking Arabic, understanding Arabic, and they need to understand or learn the Arab culture, the Muslim mindset, how things work. And unfortunately, many people in the West continue to judge Arabs and Muslims through Western binoculars, through Western eyes. They do not see the difference. Or they talk to Muslims who go to Europe, who are Western educated, and they hear something that they don't hear. Or they hear the voices that are not authentic voices. I call them. These Western educated Muslims or Arabs, they tell Westerners, what they like to hear, but they do not necessarily reflect the Arab street and the Muslim street, and that's very important. So Westerners, if they really want to understand, they need to, to learn the Arabic language, the Muslim mindset, and to be more involved. Now, going back to the Trump plan, I think it's a mistake to relate to the Trump plan as a sacred cow, as the only plan on the table. Don't make it look like that, because that's a big mistake. You need to send a warning to Hamas that this plan could change. This plan could be amended. It's not the only plan on the table. But if you say this is the only plan we have and everyone has to abide by it, Hamas will take advantage of it, and they will, So there has to be the option, another option presented to Hamas. If you do not comply 100% with your commitments or the understandings of this plan, you will be destroyed. And you know what, Dan? I don't even understand, why is Hamas part of the negotiations over the future of Gaza? Hamas should only be part of the negotiations over the release of the hostages and the bodies of the hostages. But once you talk to Hamas about the future of Gaza, about a technocratic committee, about demilitarization, decommissioning, about deploying international forces, about which areas they need to control, or even about the release of their terrorists who are behind the IDF lines behind the yellow line, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, they could
This is
become a legitimate political actor through the side door, the front door, the back door, all three.
and this is exactly what Qatar, Turkey, and to a certain extent Egypt have done. They have, for years, by the way, they have legitimized Hamas. They have turned Hamas into a legitimate player in the Palestinian arena. And I have said before on this program, Hamas must vanish from the Palestinian arena completely. Hamas should have no say and no presence. Hamas should have no say in the decision making process, and Hamas should have no political, economic, social, or military presence. There needs to be a new era. The Palestinians need to move on. As long as Hamas is there, we're stuck. We're not going to move forward. The Palestinians will never move forward, by the way. And you saw the recent public opinion poll that showed an increase in Hamas's popularity and ongoing support for October 7 among the Palestinian public. And why? Because Hamas is still there. So you need to eradicate
And the
Hamas.
public respects the resilience, the strength, and the determination of Hamas against whom they view as, funny enough, as the invader, as
Yeah,
opposed to.
contrary to all reports we were hearing before and all assessments by Western analysts, Hamas is losing its popularity, and the Palestinians are turning against Hamas, and by the end of the war, they will get rid of Hamas. Here comes a public opinion poll, and we see that, Palestinians still support Hamas and they support the armed resistance. Why? Because they see that after 2 years of fighting with Israel, Hamas is still standing on its uh, legs and on its feet, and this is very bad. So for your average Palestinian, this is victory. You failed to destroy me, as you said, so this is victory. I won, and this is very bad, and this is why Hamas is very popular now.
You and I have discussed both on the program and off the air the need for regime change. And when we operationalize that term, regime change, it means that Gaza, as all of the other areas of the Arab Muslim world, are organized by families, clans, and tribes. And there are many, many Gazan families and clans that oppose the Hamas. We had a taste of it as the Yasser Abu Shabab clan took on the Hamas and had been reportedly supported by Israel.
There are
There are
hundreds,
hundreds.
three more groups like that operating against Hamas. Hossam al-Astal group also, and other groups. And, so far we haven't really seen any real attempt or effort by these groups to replace Hamas. And I'll tell you why, because they see that in the areas under Hamas's control, Hamas is growing. And without the presence of an international or without the backing of the international community, these groups will be defeated by Hamas sooner or later.
This is why it's very important for the 200 or so Hamas jihadist terrorists that are hiding in the tunnels close to Rafah, who have requested it's almost a joke. They've requested safe passage as if they're refugees of some sort. And according to reports, the United States is pressuring Israel to give these terrorists safe passage. Now, the outcome of that, if there is a agreement that they will not get safe passage, that they will have to lay down their weapons and be arrested, interrogated by Israel, that sends an important message to the families and the clans that there's a new sheriff in town.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they will go to the areas under Hamas's control and join the jihad. It's very obvious. I mean, they're not going to go there and surrender their weapons to Hamas and, abandon the resistance. It's almost as if, reinforcing or strengthening Hamas's security presence. These people should either surrender to the IDF and be interrogated, or if they want a safe passage, to Egypt or to Libya or any other country. But allowing them to go into the areas under Hamas's control, that's, an award, a prize for Hamas.
The Hamas, as you noted in a piece that you wrote for the Gatestone Institute, that Hamas is in the last weeks alone recruited up to 7,000 new fighters, according to Arab media. reports. And, at the same time, we are seeing signs of some of these local clans burning. We saw them burning a Hamas flag just yesterday, and publicly making statements. So I think there is room to say that some of these families are taking a stand and are prepared, and Israel
Yes.
and its American partners and have got to, step up and understand, even though it's not the way they think. It's not the way the West thinks about this issue.
This is the only way to bring about regime change, by the way. And this is the only way to get rid of Hamas. Regime change is the only way to get rid of Hamas. Where we are standing right now, there is a regime in Gaza called the Hamas regime. Okay, it's weakened. It has suffered a major blow, but in the eyes of the local population and even in the eyes of the international community, there is a regime called Hamas. Now, to get rid of this regime, you need a new regime, another regime. Remember what I said before. You need to do to Hamas what Hamas did to the Palestinian Authority in 2007. Hamas staged a coup against the Palestinian Authority, and they immediately announced, we are the new governing body in Gaza. And for many Palestinians, that was it. Hamas is finished. The Palestinian Authority is finished. So create a new government in Gaza. Help these tribes, help these clans, help these armed groups, engage them, support them. Don't leave it only to Israel to do it. That's a mistake, by the way. And that plays into Hamas's hands because Hamas can present them as collaborators with Israel. There needs to be an international effort to back these groups to encourage regime change in Gaza. We don't see that. This is a mistake also. The proposed technocratic committee will be dominated by Hamas. I was speaking yesterday to officials in the Palestinian Authority. Even the Palestinian Authority is warning, by the way, that Hamas is trying to hijack this committee. The Palestinian Authority is saying this committee should be headed by a Palestinian Authority minister. And Hamas is saying, no way, I have some independent figures in Gaza who will take over. Now, if you talk about independent figures in Gaza, I see you smiling and laughing. Yes, it's a joke. If Hamas recommends you and Hamas says you are good, and Hamas says, I want to see you as part of the new government in Gaza, that means your loyalty goes to Hamas and it above any other interests. You place the interests of Hamas above the interests of your own people. And number two, no committee can function in Gaza in a free manner when you have Hamas controlling the security in Gaza. Because this committee will need Hamas's protection, or they will need the protection of some kind of a security force. And if the security force is Hamas, that means this committee will be entirely dependent on Hamas. And these are things that, I don't see anyone in the international community addressing these issues.
They're not addressing these issues, and they're also not addressing a political issue that has not been exposed. And I would suggest that Hamas, over the last 2 years, has done more to get a Hamas loyalist elected, very potentially, in the hours that we're discussing right now, the 4th of November, 2025, it is possible that a Hamas loyalist by the name of Zahoran Mamdani will become the mayor of New York. Now, I will claim that the dramatic Hamas violence, invasion, mass murder, rape, torture, kidnapping, and ongoing political war over the last 2 years, which has become arguably the number one media sensation in the West, has echoed very loudly to the West and has resulted very much in the increased popularity of Zahoran Mamdani, who has publicly, over the last 2 years, vociferously advocated for what they call the Palestinian cause, which we know is a code word for Hamas,
The
and
globalization of the intifada.
which means help our listeners and viewers understand what this really means. It also means killing Jews anywhere they are, but it also means subverting America. It's not only about the Jews, you can argue.
Then I covered two intifadas. One started in December 1987, and the second one started in 2000.
September of 2000.
In September 2000. And I can tell you all I saw was violence, blood, death, destruction, bombings, drive-by shootings, stabbings. We went through a hell of a time. If this is what Mamadani, or am I pronouncing his name
Mamdani.
right?
Yeah.
Is talking about, we are in big trouble. I mean, do you want to bring all this violence to the streets of New York and Europe and other places? Excuse me, the Intifada caused many people died during the Intifada. They were killed. In the first Intifada, I did a documentary with BBC, or sorry, Channel 4 in London, and for other networks. And no, sorry, can we start?
Yeah, keep going. It's
Yeah.
fine.
I remember that during the first Intifada, which was mostly, stone throwing, use of petrol bombs, drive-by shootings. Many people are not aware, but over 1,200 Palestinians were murdered by Palestinians on suspicion of collaboration with Israel. During the second Intifada, I mean, we all know what the second Intifada was, or for those who don't know, it was mostly a massive wave of suicide bombings. Over 1,200, 1,300 Israelis were killed, more than 4,000 Palestinians died. So these, when you use such a term as let's globalize the Intifada, this is like saying let's bring violence and death and suicide bombings to the streets of Western cities, and people need to pay attention to this. Number two, when you describe Hamas as the resistance, and you're actually implying that these people are justified or have every right to use violence and terrorism against non-Muslims. And this is exactly what Hamas is doing. And other jihadist groups. Hamas wants to replace Israel with an Islamic State. Hamas is waging a jihad, and it's not only Hamas. Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood branch for the Palestinians. So once you endorse all these messages coming out of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood and other jihadi groups, we are in trouble.
Very much so. And many in the West, excuse me, are unaware that the word intifada in Arabic means shaking off. And if you're talking about shaking off in America, you're implying that if America doesn't support the Intifada, they oppose the Intifada, and therefore they are equally enemies as of the Intifada, of Islam, or certainly the political Islam and jihadism. And this is an important point. We saw it playing out on October the 8th across scores of university campuses in the United States. This is what Intifada, globalizing the Intifada, looks like in America. And it is critically important that our friends in the United States understand that this ideological, religiously fueled war is against Western civilization, and Israel is viewed as a bridge, as a bridgehead of Western civilization in the Middle East. That's why that is motivating very much the Hamas to continue this jihad.
An important observation, Dan, during most of the demonstrations and rallies I covered in the West Bank and in Gaza during the two intifadas, each time they burned an Israeli flag, they also brought a U.S. flag and burned it next to it. And on many occasions, each time they chanted slogans against Israel, they also chanted slogans against the big Satan, America. So for them, the friend of my enemy is also my enemy. They have a very serious problem with the U.S. They see the U.S., or many people among the Palestinians, see the U.S. as an obstacle in their way to achieve their goal of obliterating Israel.
They do, and that's why it requires extra careful attention to Zohran Mamdani, who is, I call him the hip-hop Islamist. It's a piece that it's coming out on jcpa.org, the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. And one of the things that you and I will be working on in the coming 12 months is something called Hamas Watch, which we're very honored that you're taking a senior role there in helping us understand every day what this type of we're going to implement this type of analysis. We're going to bring Hamas video. We're going to bring Hamas statements. We're going to put all of this Hamas jihad Islamism in context every single day and make sure that the West understands the religious war that is being prosecuted against it and against Israel. I think
And
it
it's
is
going to
critically
be a
important.
very easy job then. We don't
It's all out there,
we
isn't
don't
it?
have to make a very big effort, by the way. It's all out there. All you need to do is just, locate it and highlight it and translate it sometimes.
Well, that's it. And as we end, we have to, place our attention today on November 4th, 2025, on what's happening in America and for New York to understand that if this Hamas loyalist is elected, is elected mayor, and this program should go up actually today, even before the voting finishes, we will see enormous pressure, financial pressure, BDS pressure against Israel, cancellation of contracts for Israeli products and services, a lot of political pressure placed on pro-Israel or Zionist American Jewish groups. This is a dramatic moment in the very storied history of of New York, which began with the Dutch colonialism in 1624. And I'm someone that was born in New York, grew up in New York, educated in New York, and recognized this very, very dramatic and potentially very painful moment, requiring the organized Jewish community that did not vote for Mamdani, which is the majority of that community, to really take action and keep and keep the forces of good moving forward and hold if he does become mayor, hold this mayor to account in the name of Western civilization, in the name of the Jewish people, in the name of the great history, present, and future of one of the greatest cities in New York and the greatest cities in the United States and the most populous Jewish community in the world other than the state of Israel itself.
Yeah, let's wait and see. I mean, you know, as you mentioned, or you hinted, or you stated very clearly, uh, if, if you have a candidate who is promoting all these bad messages, all these negative messages, first of all, this will boost the radicals in our part of the world, those anti-Israel elements in the Middle East, including Hamas. And it's also a very severe blow to people who want to build bridges between Jews and Arabs in this part of the world.
Yes, that's right. He's breaking bridges,
Yeah,
and we're
this is
trying to
not a
build
way.
bridges.
This is not a way to
Yes.
build bridges.
Well, that's what we're trying to do on Al Shakar al Satlan, is to build bridges between the Arab Muslim majority Middle East and the other minorities in the Middle East. And I think that our partnership and friendship is a testimony to that hope, the optimism that's viable, real, and possible.
Promoting anti-Israel sentiments does not make you pro-Palestinian or pro-Arab. It makes you an Israel hater, and it certainly does not help build bridges between Jews and Arabs in this part of the world.
I want to dedicate this program to your beloved father, whom I adored, Jamil, who translated Animal Farm to Arabic, and we're trying to get it printed. And I think he really had it very, very clear about that type of regime that we saw in Animal Farm. And when I had asked him in one of the breaks when we both worked for Israeli television, who is the pig in his view, in his Arabic version of Animal Farm, he said Yasser Arafat. I think that says everything.
He was not only referring to Yasser Arafat, I believe he was referring to most of the Arab
It was.
dictators, the corrupt Arab leaders. But for him, Yasser Arafat was the closest person. So
That's right. It was
So,
dictatorship.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
about
well, yeah,
dictatorship, and that's what we're
yeah,
trying to fight against
yes.
in the name of peace, in the name of stability, security, and a better region for all of its peoples. So, Khaled, thank you ever so much for this
Thank you.
great conversation. I hope we've made a contribution to the thinking about these very, very
Thank you.
complex issues, and we'll look very much forward to welcoming our audience once again next week. I'll be in the United States. You'll be here, but we'll both be in the United States in another few weeks. But in the meantime, we'll have a long distance our Middle East when I'll be there from 2 days from now for the next few weeks, and we'll have this across the ocean episodes of our Middle East. Thanks so much, Khaled.
Thank you.